Hey guys, this is Paul from Get Yours Online Training and Nutrition, and today is the first in my rugby fitness related response videos where I answer your questions regarding rugby related strength and conditioning, fitness, nutrition, all things rugby basically. So first question was a right doozy. It's from an old friend of mine, Sean Hickey. Essentially his question was, how does one who works say 50-60 hours per week maximize training efficiency to make sure that they're covering as many facets of rugby-related fitness as possible, i.e., strength, power, speed, aerobic conditioning, anaerobic conditioning, and obviously to a degree size as well. I think Sean wanted me to kind of give a type of training that encompasses all of that. Unfortunately, no such type really exists. So off the bat, I'm going to warn you, this video is quite lengthy. It's going to be roughly 20 plus minutes long. So what I'm going to do is in the description to the video, I will put what section of the video is what, so that you can skip to the section that you feel is relevant to you. So the first thing I'm going to do is give a couple of very general rules that I believe will help maximize your efficiency, and they can be applied to anything. Then I'm going to talk about the in-season specifics. So when you're playing fixtures, how do you maximize your training efficiency then? How do you stay in the best shape to play? Then I'm going to talk about the off-season / pre-season. They are essentially all one big block, but there are blocks within the blocks, so to speak. So I will talk about the general physical preparation phase, as I like to call it. I will then talk about a building phase and then a peaking phase going into your season. Before we go any further, if everything I say in this video and in all future videos, as much as possible, is backed by scientific evidence, practical application from myself and my past experiences, but it is still largely my opinion based on, like I said, my own experience, the experience of those that I follow and trust, and the reading material of guys that frankly know quite a lot more than I do. It is not me saying this is the only way of doing this, so if you disagree, that's absolutely fine. It's not even me saying it's the optimal way to do this. In fact, what I would say is, before you do anything like this, is get the word optimal out of your head. Optimal doesn't exist very often for most of us, especially people who work 50 to 60 hours per week. So take that word optimal and get rid of it. Think more about consistency. And think about what I'm going to say next, which are the two rules that I believe are most important to getting good training results when you work 50-60 hours a week. The first one is acceptance. If you work that many hours per week, there needs to be on your part a general acceptance that you are not going to hit the same heights as someone who does it full time. And that's just the way it is. I love Instagram. Instagram can be a great tool, but there's a worrying trend recently of kind of, frankly, fitness professionals who expect people who aren't fitness professionals to match their levels of dedication and volume of training in the gym, and somehow that they're implying that these people are not serious about progressing if they can't do that. That's not the case. If you work 50-60 hours per week, that's your priority. That pays your bills. That's why you do it. You want to get better, but you are only ever going to be as good as you can be in your situation, in your circumstances. So cut yourself some slack, essentially, is what I'm saying. Doesn't mean we're not going to try. It doesn't mean we're going to give up, but we're going to be realistic about what we can achieve. Do that, you'll be far happier, you'll make more progress. Second rule, before we move on, the 80-20 rule. If you work in business, or in fact in any real field, you'll have heard of the 80-20 rule. It's the concept that you will get 80% of your results from 20% of your actions. Now in training, strength training, that will obviously mean 80% of your results from 20% of your movements. And if you look at how I've structured each phase of training and each part of the season, there are 20% of things that really don't change at all. We get 80% of our results from doing 20% of stuff, but executing it well, executing it with a clear plan, and executing it at the correct intensity for that time of the season. So those are the two rules to live by. Without any further ado, let's jump into the first phase, which is how do we deal with in-season training when we work a lot of hours. Okay guys, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is in-season training. So in-season training, ironically, is actually the time where the person working long hours is at the least disadvantage compared to someone who doesn't. For the simple reason that obviously in season, you shouldn't really be lifting more than twice, maximum 3 times a week anyway, because you're training twice a week with your teammates, which is normally high intensity, and then you're playing on a weekend, which is obviously very high intensity, very physically demanding thing to do. So what you're really trying to do in season is maintain your acceleration, maintain your fitness in terms of not being broken, and maintain your strength as much as possible, and maybe actually make some small increases in strength as the season goes on. You don't need to be doing large amounts of high intensity interval training by yourself, because obviously nothing gets you match fit quite like playing rugby. So if you're playing week in and week out, then you are going to have good levels of conditioning by pushing through those barriers every time you play, making that final tackle, making that last bust. Those are the things that are going to get you rugby fit more than anything you can really do in the gym. The gym is for enhancing your individual energy systems and maximising their efficiency, so that when it comes to games of rugby, you are able to push through those barriers, but nothing quite matches the actual act of doing it. So don't waste tons of time in season trying to do loads of high intensity interval training. All you're going to do is just fatigue yourself to the point where you don't actually perform well on a Saturday. So I'm going to give you a really basic structure to try and live by in season. Okay, so let's say you're someone who does work a lot of hours a week. 2 times a week is all you can manage because you are training twice a week and then playing on a Saturday or Sunday as well. So simple structure. Let's go 1 upper body dominant day and 1 lower body dominant day. On the upper body dominant day, you're actually going to start with 1 speed-based or strength speed-based lower body movement. By strength speed, what I mean is a movement performed with load, with a decent load, but not such a high load that it can't be performed quickly. So bar speed is good. So Olympic lifting falls immediately into that. That's very, very technical, and you can waste a lot of time learning how to do it. So let's just say on our upper body day, we're going to use something like a speed deadlift as our lower body speed, strength speed movement. So rather than using, say, 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max and doing sets of 5 and reps with that, which is very much strength based, you're going to, same movement, same technique, but you're going to drop that load down to more like 40% of your 1 rep max. And you're going to do 4 lots of 5, for example, but each rep will be dynamic. Each rep will be done at speed deadlift. And you move it as fast as you can. You don't go slower because the weight's lower. You try and move that weight quickly. And that's the speed element already taken care of in terms of maintenance of speed. Okay, well, certainly maintenance of power. You then go into your bread and butter upper body strength movement. So something along the lines of a flat barbell bench press. Depending on how you're feeling, it could be 5 sets of 5 if you're feeling great. If you want to err on the side of caution, it could be 5 sets of 3 or even 4 or 3 sets of 3. High intensity, and by intensity I mean percentage of your 1 rep max, not intensity as we would generally think of it as getting it sweaty and feeling tired. I mean intensity in terms of it's a high percentage of your 1 rep max, so something like 80%, maybe even up to 85%. So you're really lifting big weight, but not at such a volume that it's going to massively fatigue you. Then it gets a lot more general. We're talking basic superset. So if it's an upper body day, you want some kind of upper body pull, upper body push superset. So for example, chest supported dumbbell row, followed straight away without resting by a dumbbell incline press. 3 sets, maybe 4 if you're feeling good, of 10 reps per exercise, resting between each superset. And again, you can up the weights as you go week to week if you're feeling strong. If you're feeling weak on a given day, drop it down a little bit. It's just about maintaining conditioning, maintaining some form of strength and strength movement. Then pretty simple, go into a basic core movement. It could be, so for example, if you're doing 2 sessions a week, one day it could be anti-extension core, so front planks, rollouts, dead bugs. The other day it could be anti-rotation core, so standing Pallof hold, half kneeling cable rotations on the other day. And obviously you could do it for 3 sets of 10 if it's a repetition-based core movement, or 3 lots of 40 seconds, 30 seconds if it's a static hold. And then this is the important bit. Because you are getting your conditioning, your anaerobic conditioning from actually playing rugby week in and week out, this is very much up to you and how your energy levels are at the time. If you're really worried about your aerobic fitness, maybe you're someone who carries a lot of weight and you're worried that your aerobic capacity is not allowing you to push those anaerobic boundaries in games with prolonged bouts of it and repetitive bouts of it, then just nice and easy, steady state cardio at the end of each session, 10 to 15 minutes, 60 to 70% of your heart rate max. And that's a basic session. And then obviously you do your upper body session one day, lower body the other day, and that's basically it. If you are someone who has been told actually speed is paramount, you're lacking in that, then a lot of your off season will be dedicated to getting faster. It may be that you do both your strength movements for a while are strength speed movements. So you drop those loads and you lift explosively for both sessions for say a month. You can mix this in depending on what your individual goal is. If you're someone who needs to get their top end strength up or loses it very quickly if you don't lift at high percentages, then really focus on that. Okay, so that's in-season training. As I've said, it's actually not a bad time in relation to someone who doesn't work that many hours to be someone who does, if you really follow that 80-20 rule. I'm going to get my basic lifts in, I'm going to make sure my numbers are good on those, but I'm not going to beat myself up for not getting in the gym 4 or 5 times a week. It's in season. I shouldn't be doing that anyway. It's counterproductive. So that's in-season training. So now I'm going to talk about off-season / pre-season. They are technically two separate things, but they do tend to blur together quite a lot. So I'm going to cover them basically at the same time and break them down to kind of mini sections for you to really help you understand. This is where it gets tricky for someone who works a lot of hours, because you're not going to have the time to get in the gym 4 times a week to lift and then say 2 separate sessions of high intensity interval training as well. Or certainly not going to have the energy to do those things. So we have to maximize the time that we've got. So I think this is where periodizing your training becomes quite important. I don't mean it in terms of you literally only focus on one thing for any period of training, because the whole point is we're trying to really cover as many facets as possible. But I do believe in having a sort of a main goal for each block of training, and the majority of your work is given over to achieving that goal rather than trying to do everything at once. Okay, so periodizing training is quite important. So here's a really simple way of periodizing training. Okay, bearing in mind that the off-season, pre-season actually isn't that long. Once the season finishes in like May sort of time, a lot of people are back playing in September. It feels like ages, but it really isn't. So first phase, 4 to 6 weeks, is what we call a general physical preparation phase. So in that phase, you are going to want to bump your volume up a little bit from the in-season because you don't have matches and training anymore. But it's not about getting all your results straight away. The general physical preparation phase, or GPP to save time, is where we are looking to do some movements we haven't done for a while, do some variations of those key lifts to sort of correct weaknesses and imbalances, and just generally recover from a long season, get some general strength base kind of set, and some basic aerobic conditioning that we won't be getting from playing, because we're not playing at the moment. Okay, so again, I'm going to talk largely to people who would not have a lot of time to do individual gym sessions. So let's say, for example, you're going to do 3 sessions a week now rather than 2. So you're going to go, I would say, go lower body, upper body, lower body. And if you want, you can then flip that the following week and do it in 2-week cycles. So then the second week will be upper, lower, upper. Or you could just do more lower body than upper body, because to be honest, most of your gains are going to come from that lower body. So same structure of training as in season, and in fact across all parts of the season, because that's the most efficient way of kind of switching from one part of training to the next. If you don't have to relearn the structure of your sessions every 4 weeks, you're going to be training a lot more efficiently. That's my opinion. So the structure stays largely the same, but just some of the content and some of the volume and intensity will change as you move through the pre-season. So let's say 3 times a week, lower, upper, lower, in that order. Okay, we still do our strength movements first, and we still do some strength speed movements as well. So pretty much nothing changes, except you can get more variety because you now have 2 sessions a week on, say, lower body, or maybe 2 sessions a week on upper body. So we're getting some more variety in there. We're covering more bases, but we're not really changing what we're trying to do. We're trying to generally physically prepare the body. So if we've been doing heavy back squatting and box squatting for a very long time, let's do some front squats. Let's do some Zercher squats. Let's do things we haven't done for a while to round the body a little bit better. Just make it, a more balanced body, more balanced physique. If we've been slacking on our rowing motions, or we've noticed we've started to get quite hunched in our posture, let's get those rowing motions in plenty of volume and correct some patterns. That's what GPP is for. But the basic structure of our strength movements or strength speed movements, followed by a superset. Now we've got a bit more time and energy. Maybe we do 2 supersets just to make it a bit more challenging. Maybe that's something we can add in as the phase goes on. Lots of single-sided stuff, so things like your Bulgarian split squats on lower body days, single leg RDLs, one-arm dumbbell presses, one-arm overhead presses, things to really improve proprioception and just get each side of the body stable and working independently of one another. Those are the kind of things that you want to be doing in the GPP phase. So you're going to pick movements almost on purpose in your compound strength movements that aren't going to allow you to handle the maximum amount of weight. So front squatting, you're obviously not going to be able to handle as much weight as you can on a back squat. That's okay. You're still building quad strength so that when you go back into back squatting, actually, you'll find that you're able to lift more. That's what GPP is all about. And on top of the strength hypertrophy superset, still got that core work in there at sort of 3 to 4 sets. And our steady state now we can do steady state cardio at the end of each session because we don't have certain fatigue levels. We're not saving ourselves for anything. Get that steady state at the end of the session. But now we can add in 1, or if you can find the time, 2 high intensity interval sessions. They only need to last for say 15 to 20 minutes. And we're looking at, say you're on the bike, you're doing 15 seconds flat out, 45 seconds rest, 15 flat out, 45 rest, and you're doing that for 15 minutes at first, and you can build that as you go. Okay, so GPP is exactly what it says on the tin. It is just generally physically preparing your body for the much more challenging and much more high volume building phase, which is to come immediately after that. Okay, so our next phase of training is what I like to call the build phase. I got that term from Eric Cressy, who incidentally is a very, very good online coach. I definitely recommend you look him up after you watch this video. He can give you some more specific information if that's what you want. The build phase is exactly what it says in the tin. We're taking what we did in our GPP phase and we're adding to it. We're starting to steer it now away from the general, or not completely away from the general, more towards our own specific needs. So if we're someone who's been told that, we need to really improve our speed, our acceleration, we're now going to start to really focus on a lot of strength speed movements at the beginning of sessions, and we're going to add plyo in regardless. So a little bit, maybe once or twice a week, of some basic plyometric work like standing long jumps, depth jumps, plyo push-ups on upper body days, those kind of things. But if we are someone who's looking to really improve dynamism and speed, maybe now both, well no, not maybe, definitely, plenty of volume, both movements become strength speed movements. So now we're looking at, 50% of 1 RM, 6 sets of 3 of a basic compound movement. Could be a squat, so we pause at the bottom, up dynamically, could be bench press. We're now looking to really improve that speed. We certainly don't eliminate out and out strength work altogether because that's part of our 80-20, but we start to include more of the stuff that we really want to focus on. If you're someone who's already immensely strong but you've been challenged to improve your dynamism, then you can afford to take some time off of the out and out really heavy high percentage lifting and focus more on your specific goal. If you're the opposite and you're someone who's actually pretty dynamic but you just lack real top end strength, now both strength movements become out and out strength. So we get the loads up to 80%, we swap the movements from GPP to movements that allow us to handle more weight. So maybe we go from a front squat to a back squat, or we go from a full range deadlift to maybe a partial rep deadlift, things like that. you know, bench press to pin press, something like that. It can be whatever you want it to be. And we up those intensities and we up the volume. So now we're looking at really, we want to be trying to getting sort of a good 5 lots of 5 in per workout to really improve our strength. But again, you base it on how you feel. If you're struggling, 4 lots of 5, or 5 lots of 4, or 4 lots of 4. Base it on how you feel on the day, but just know that we're trying to increase that volume so we can get more out of it. Structure of the session will stay the same. On days where you're doing plyo, you would do that first, followed by your strength movement, followed by your superset. Maybe you can add an extra superset in now that you're trying to kind of really build capacity, core movement, and then the only real difference is that we'd look to add in more volume or more intensity on our high intensity interval training. So rather than doing 15 minutes of 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off like we did in our GPP, now we're looking at maybe getting an extra session in, and if we fail that, we're going to look to at least go for 20 minutes, 25 minutes at say 20 on, 40 off, or 25 on, 35 off, just gradually increasing that intensity as we go. So that would be how we would build on our GPP, which gradually move it towards our kind of peak performance goals, which lends itself to our final phase, which would be the peak before we go into our first game. Right guys, we are now at the final phase of training and hopefully the final point of a kind of response to this question. If you've stuck with me throughout this entire thing, then you are a star, and I hope that this has been worth it. If you fast forward to this point, then I don't blame you. Peaking phase is what I like to call it. This is where we take everything we've been doing throughout the GPP and the building phase, and now we start to taper that into our own specific needs. So regardless of what our goals are, I'm going to recommend that as you get closer to the season and closer to your first kind of pre-season game / first regular season game, we're going to work in some kind of out and out speed work in every session, because now gaining more strength has become less important than translating some of that newfound strength into improved pace. So now we need to hit the speed training, and we need to hit it with some decent volume. So doing it every session at the beginning of your session becomes far more important now. So that could be practicing the actual skill of running. So 10-meter sprints, 15-meter sprints, anything up to 30-meter sprints. But obviously if you want to keep fatigue down and really attack maximum speed, 10-meter sprint is the way to go. Not as fatiguing, and you really are working on maximum pace. 5 sets of that at the beginning of a session, and that's really good. If you don't want to do sprinting every single session, you're still doing your plyometric work. You're doing your broad jumps, you're doing your depth jumps. It could be, again, the plyo push-ups, but the volume increases and we do it every session, because now we're looking to kind of taper into speed to go with our strength. Now, if you are someone who has got great strength already, then now you can really start to eliminate the out-and-out strength work and fully replace it for the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks with strength speed movements all the time. So now those first 2 strength movements are going to be strength speed most of the time now. So like I said, reduced loads, maybe 50% of 1 RM, 6 sets of 3, or 80% of 1 RM, 8 lots of 1. But we're looking at pace and dynamism now, not gaining more top end strength. If you're someone who needs more top end strength and you're still not happy with it, then it's pretty much, again, a 50-50 split of the 2. But now we're really whacking up the loads on those strength days and really adding the volume to the strength speed work. Rest of the session doesn't change. Still got our superset, be it upper body or lower body. We're still, pushing the boundaries on that, trying to lift a little bit more weight every time. Maybe doing an extra superset or an extra set to really increase our capacity. Still getting our core work in. And now we're really looking to attack the high intensity interval cardio when we do it, because now we really need to get to the point where our anaerobic system is working well going into that first game. It's still going to hit you like a ton of bricks. There's no way around that. Anyone who's done this knows that no matter how good preseason goes, you go into that first game and you still feel like, crap, I'm not ready for this. But you just got to trust that you've put in the work and you will come through that first game. And then you're back into the season again, guys. And it's all about maintaining as much of these amazing gains that you've made as you can throughout the season and staying in one piece. So it's got very wordy. As we've gone on, obviously, it's gotten far more complex, but I've tried to keep the structure of all your training sessions basically the same. All that changes is that the volume of the things we need to improve increases as that goes on until you get into season, and then obviously you've got to maintain the volume at a sensible level to allow you to perform. I hope this has answered your question, Sean, in terms of attacking as many facets of fitness as possible, but always sort of prioritizing one at any given time so you can actually improve it rather than just fighting off a bunch of different stuff all at once and not really getting anywhere. I've tried to include it so that it's only 3 sessions a week, which I really hope would not be too many sessions to try and achieve. The 4th session doesn't count, but it's going to be so short in length that I'm sure you could find time for it. If I haven't fully answered something for anyone watching this video that they kind of really hoped I would cover and I didn't, then now's your chance. Whack it in the comment section below, and again, whatever comment gets the most likes going into next week, I'll then be answering that topic. So I'm just going to leave you with 2 more kind of simple rules to live by if you are someone who has got limited training time. Most important factor is throughout this entire process is listen to your body. Yes, I'm recommending stuff. As I've already said, this is just my opinion. If you cannot physically do it, then ease off a little bit. Make sure that you can continuously do this rather than do it for 4 weeks and then have to take 2 weeks off because you're broken or just physically exhausted. And the reason I say that is because you could put in all this great work. You could have an amazing off season. You make tons of gains. It's going to be very little use to you if you tear a calf in your first pre-season training session because your body is so beaten up. Consistency is absolutely key. Live by that 80-20 rule, and if you want more help with specifics, you know where to find me. I'm very competitively priced. So guys, that's it from me. I'm going to wrap this up before I talk any longer. Get your questions in. You've got until next Thursday. Question with the most likes before next Thursday gets answered next week. This is Paul from Get Yours. Peace out.